Conspiracy theories and propaganda throughout pop culture and in our real world in this very Comic-Con special edition. We're going to go down the panel, say our names, what we do, and our personal conspiracy. So I'm JD Lombardi. I am a middle school science teacher up in Glendale, outside of LA. And I also have a YouTube channel doing science videos for free, just for the heck of it, to help educate and have fun with it. I'd say my conspiracy is that there are ghosts, ghosts are real, and Ghostbusters are real, and busting makes me feel good.
My name is GL Lambert. I'm a screenwriter. I have a podcast, GL Lambert Explains It All. And my personal conspiracy is there is a second Snyder Cut that WB doesn't want us to know about.
Hi, my name is Kimber Shan. I'm a podcaster and comedian, and my favorite conspiracy theory is that the Illuminati is running the entire world because it's ridiculous.
Hi, my name is King Steph. I am a model, influencer, content creator, podcast host like us with Kimber Shan right here. And my favorite conspiracy, not my favorite, but Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself.
Hi, I'm Christine Shaw. I'm a vice principal of a high school, and my favorite conspiracy theory is that the magic bullet was indeed ejected from one gun.
And so we start off by just defining it. We want to make sure we're all on the same page of exactly what is conspiracy. But the joining together of two or more individuals acting in collusion to achieve a desired goal. And then Alan Moore had something more to say about it. Don't worry, I'm not going to read slide by slide. That's terrible presenting, but this is such a good quote from Alan Moore, the famed author of Watchmen. And conspiracy theorists believe in a conspiracy because that is more comforting. The truth is far more frightening. Nobody is in control. The world is rudderless. That's a terrible Alan Moore, but I want to give a little different voice. Yeah. Anything else you want to say? No. Okay. Alan Moore's description. So we have it in three sections. Section one is conspiracies and storytelling. We're at Comic-Con, so we know many that are out there. And this idea that there's always there's something behind this evil plot. It's not just one villain doing a simple crime or whatever. There's something more going on typically. And so why are conspiracies so ingrained in our entertainment? Us, all listening in the room at convention, are comic and movie fans more susceptible? Like, are we wired in a way where we think there's more going on than your average person? And so we have a few examples. Of course, Hail Hydra.
Yeah, and this is great. Everyone's watched Winter Soldier, and if you read the Marvel comic books, it's like this idea that S.H.I.E.L.D. was infiltrated by Hydra is such a great concept. And it goes to our big point about comics and storytelling in general, is that it's always that twist. What's the next twist, and how do you give the audience that twist so they keep reading, they keep the next issue coming? It's a very capitalistic idea, but when it comes to brainwashing and priming us to believe conspiracy theories, it kind of, when you grow up always thinking like, okay, who's behind this? And who set it in motion, and who can I trust? It kind of primes us all for real life conspiracy theories like, well, if Lex Luthor did this behind the scenes, maybe they're doing this in the real world with Kennedy assassination or whatever. So it really speaks to us with the Hydra. It's like the government behind all these conspiracies. Then we got the Watchmen, which I think you would think was like an elitist, intelligent man who thinks he's better than anybody, could save the world, conspires against his own friends, his own comrades. And I think, so we got government, and we got a soul man influencer they call almost an Illuminati type figure, an elite character with Ozymandias, who did the conspiracy in Watchmen.
And just to switch it up, so we can go from the comic page into cinema, but as good and bad as those Star Wars movies are, the last six, or sorry, I lost count. One cool thing that I personally, I can't speak for the whole panel, was Palpatine's rise to power, and all the conspiring going on behind the scenes, like really well done, even in crappy episode one. Sorry if I offended anyone.
But no, even in episode one, like you see Palpatine, and you have a character like Valorum, who is like I think he was like the noble senator, right?
He's the chancellor.
Yeah, noble chancellor, and then you have
chancellor.
somebody come up and usurp the power from him so easily and by playing the thing. So I think those prequel trilogy movies are great when it comes to conspiracy because we actually see Sidious rise to power in a very
Within a democracy. He's working with the system and then changes the system into an empire. Then, of course, Matrix.
Are we living in a simulation?
I definitely think we're living in a simulation at all times.
And that's because she watched The Matrix. It primed us to believe in even the simulation hypothesis, and it's great stuff. Like all these things we're talking about, from the movies to the films, it's like we as fans, we want to believe there's more out there because we've been raised to believe there's more out there. Even recently, I was asked a few years ago to help write the movie Clifford that just came out last week, and their problem with that script and why they brought me in to try to script doctor it was Clifford, the Big Liver Dog. Clifford has a problem in the I think the second act they had where like the conspiring company that drew Clifford, no spoilers, I'm not gonna make anything, but it wasn't believable. How do we make this character seem like he's real? How do we make this whole Clifford thing work in the second act with this company trying to steal him? So even then, you see that we're still trying to propagate this idea of like the conspiracy in our films, even as kids' movies, this aimed at 12-year-olds, and like we're always like, oh, what's the conspiracy with Clifford? That's a real thing. That's a real meeting that Paramount had with me. And so you got, it's like we've been brainwashed and we really don't know it.
This is more about conspiracies, but there's a bit of propaganda because the way I see it, I think most of us would agree that it kind of go hand in hand. And so every good conspiracy needs solid propaganda behind it. And the latest Spider-Man: Far From Home was a good example of that. What was going on? Did you want to say anything about this?
No, I mean, we all seen Spider-Man: I hope in this room. It's like the ending with like J. Jonah Jameson. We really see him as like the shotgun that aims the bullets of like, this guy's a menace. How do you know he's a menace? Because one guy said it, and that's all we need. In this day, in this 24-hour news cycle, all we need is somebody to accuse somebody of something, and he's a menace. And I think they did a great job at the end of Far From Home.
And I'm sure we're going to get into later, but the idea of repetition, even if it's from one person, if you just hear it enough, the subconscious starts believing it. It's freaking crazy, the brain. A deliberate and systematic attempt to share perceptions, manipulate cognitions, and direct behavior to achieve a response that furthers the desired intent of the propagandist. It's from Garth Joett and Victoria O'Neill. You said you read this book, right? I read every book. I read every book. Thought it was a good definition. And we put this picture here because I don't know if you guys have known QAnon, wait, am I saying it right? QAnon, that sounds weird. Or just Q has embraced the Punisher character and made it their own.
Why do you think they've embraced the Punisher?
Because he's a vigilante that's goes against the rules, but
But is it more like it's the system has failed him and his family?
Yeah.
And so QAnon thinks our system has failed, and so that's why they use sarcasm.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Some of the examples. So Bane would be how can I say it? It's not always from the political right or left. It really is both. And in fact, when we talked about Bane here, he's kind of like an extremist lefty that wants to do certain things to further his plan and everything. And so there's Bane, there's Magneto and the Brotherhood of Mutants is a really good one. You know more of his story, Guy, if you want to speak a little bit.
Kimber, what's your Bane impression?
Don't do that to her.
I think that I do not have one.
Use the word. I'm here for the suture.
See, that's a lot better than anything that I could have done.
And the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, we all know Magneto's drive. It's like, it's total propaganda when you read in the comics, but then you put in the focus of the real world and like, all right, if you're a minority that's been basically demonized all these years, of course you're going to follow somebody like Magneto or even like the Malcolm X, what we saw with the Muslims back in the 60s. So he's a great propaganda character as well.
Killmonger, Liberator.
The internet loved Killmonger.
Yeah.
It was like weird how like
Internet's Harlem.
They were obsessed because he was fine. That's why.
Michael B. Jordan, let's go.
But I mean, we talked about this before. It was like he's. I don't know like how you guys think, but he's a great villain, not because he's cute, but because though I guess that helps. It's that some of the stuff he says, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. Like I think the best villains out there are the ones that are not
the ones that are
totally
relatable.
insane. Yes,
I feel like he was a relatable villain.
Right. I mean, he went too far, obviously, but
did he go far enough?
And then like something totally different, kind of Katniss.
And Katniss is like a dystopian like social media influencer. It's like they paraded her out to like both presidents like parade her out like, look, she's the Mockingjay, and then like all right, they've been using this woman for like 3 movies in a row.
Yeah, and to be clear, it's not so much that she's the propagandist, it's that she's a tool that was used, and those who've seen the movie read the books, so. You got to go classic, but there's this like 84 kind of Watchmen connection.
Yeah.
Christy, like the
So,
speak to
as a
this.
vice principal educator for over 22 years, mostly AP literature, AP English, so this text and Fahrenheit 451, the one I'm going to speak to next, were really prominent. Audience poll, how many have read 1984?
Wow.
Thank you very much. So you understand, talk about propaganda, right? That was the entire machine that moved this novel, and the fear that came out of the World War II, and this idea that this propaganda, war is peace, can be ingrained in the minds of a society and have them feel quelled. They're not going to worry about whatever else is going outside because there's a war, external war, so we ourselves inside are safe. Same thing that I saw parallel to Watchmen. End of Watchmen, we have Ozymandias who says we have an outside enemy, comes in, alien, sound wave that destroys New York, but now we don't have to worry about the external any longer. And then we have the less empathetic Dr. Manhattan who says, you're right, it's logically sound, that's what's happening. Problem is, it's a ruling group harming those that are almost sheep-like within these two worlds for their purpose and their intent, their deliberate intent. The thought is trying to discern what's fact or fiction, or in this case, fact, right? Because Bradbury comes along and speaks the same thing. If you're going to have firemen that are actually going to be destroying knowledge and destroying the ability for people to think on their own because they're burning books. This is a completely ironic take on what a fireman does, right? They're supposed to save society, but in this backwards dystopia, they are saving society by causing them not to think, and that's helping the person in charge, the powers that be. There is one scene or one moment in that. How many have read Fahrenheit 452? Okay, so you remember Catherine, when Guy Montag's wife. There's a scene where he walks in after a long day's work, burning books, and comes in and she's laying there on the bed, lackadaisical, with these seashell thimble radios, or one of them, in her ear. This is in 1953, and this is what we're dealing with now. And the Bradbury laments that if anybody is going to be walking around with those, are they going to completely ignore the world and its problems because of that? And I'm not saying that all of us that are plugged in are ignoring the world and the problems, but if we're alone focused on our world only, what happens to changing the rest of it?
And I also want to mention that I'm sure a lot of you remember the idea of the screens, the walls. Like you don't say, "Oh, I want another big TV." Like, "Oh, I need another wall installed." And you're like, "What?"
Right?
Like,
She wanted
surround.
that fourth wall. She
Yeah,
wanted the
3
full
walls
room
wasn't
covered
enough to get that
yeah.
360 video experience. Like, oh, we're not there yet, but
Oh yeah.
the TV screens are thinner now. Sorry. So this was a section 2, propaganda in new media. Tactics in comics and film are easy to spot, but what happens when the battleground moves online? So in a world of distrust, why do so many people trust random people on the internet?
Because they find it.
I'm sure we see. I'm sure a lot of you have noticed there's a lack of professionalism. It's like the lines are blurred, and so instead of having an authoritative figure, which has its own problems, I understand, but like someone who has a PhD in microbiology or whatever. Oh no, it's just he's up in his ivory tower or whatever. And it's like, oh, but this guy, sitting on his toilet, on recording on his phone, he makes sense because he's saying what I already think, that kind of thing. Confirmation bias, right? So this is where you guys.
Our forte.
Yeah, it's your forte.
No, I mean, I just personally being an influencer, I feel like you have to have a certain level of integrity with the things that you post, and that has not always been the case. So as you can see, there are people who are actually paid to blog false information, and if you're a follower of a certain person and you trust their brand credibility, then you're going to go along with what they're saying. This girl, I'm not even going to read the quote because it's so ridiculous, but she has 7.8 million followers. If you're relatively educated, I don't think you're going to listen to what she's saying about the vaccine. But if you're not, and you think she's pretty and you've been following her for a few years, you might listen to it. So personally, me being an influencer, so when the vaccine first came out, I was worried about it like everybody else, but I didn't speak on it because I didn't want to influence anyone one way or the other while I figured it out for me. Obviously, I got vaccinated like most of us had to be, and I feel great about it, and that's when I was speaking on it when I felt educated on it. So I feel like there is a certain level of integrity you need to have when you're putting stuff out on the internet. That being said, because a lot of people don't have that level of integrity, Instagram, Facebook have kind of put in safeguards where if you post something about COVID-19, let's say, a little banner will pop up on the bottom of whatever your post is. So I could be saying something crazy, like vaccines are gonna kill everybody, or I could be saying something great, like I just got one. But the banner will pop up regardless, and it'll say, would you like to know more about COVID-19? Because of this vast spread of misinformation that really came to a head during the entire Trump presidential election cycle.
To piggyback off of that, I'll say the internet is a place where there are no gatekeepers. Like there's nobody managing it, so it's a breeding ground for lies, fairy tales, and fallacies to be everywhere. So because of that, I definitely feel like it's fake news being spread everywhere, even though I hate that term fake news. But I feel like within that, anybody has a voice, everybody has a voice, anybody can say anything. So how do you know, how do you decipher what is actual fact
and that's a great
and what's not?
That's a great thing, because that's information that's democratized and everybody can kind of have their own world on the internet. But that being said, you have to be even more vigilant about who you're listening to, what you're consuming, and what they're really about, if they're educated
And why are you
on it.
consuming it?
Yeah, I'm not gonna take vaccination advice from her. Unless she somehow has a PhD in virology that I don't know about, not going to.
But when brands come to you and want you to market something, how do you discern I'm gonna do it could be something like a teeth whitening company, which isn't harmless, but then when other companies want you to push other things and you don't know their background, do you vet them before you agree to take money from the company?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You have to Google everything. But I also think if something's not in line with your personal brand, then it doesn't make sense to do it unless, there's not really, there's money out there for it, but that comes down to integrity, right? You shouldn't just take everything that comes along. And there was huge backlash, but about the Kardashians kind of marketing those weight loss lollipops, which is ridiculous. The weight loss lollipops, and they're you guys push body dysmorphia on people, you can't lose weight eating a lollipop, and you guys are all photoshopping your images, and it's that type of responsibility that I think the public expects influencers and people with big followings to have at this point.
Okay, so a little bit more on this. You kind of fell into a little rabbit hole with the 4chan.
Yeah, I got. I was watching a documentary on QAnon, and I went deep into the 2chan, 4chan, 8chan, and then I didn't know a friend of ours he's on there all the time, and he's dude, let me tell you the real. They're not even scratching the surface. I'm can I really trust what this guy's saying about this stuff? Because he was defending 4chan, and I'm I don't know anything about it, but I would say that it is a breeding ground for a lot of these guys who make these cute little memes that get shared, and you don't know they come from the source. You think it's just a funny meme. And so that's another way we see stuff spreading. And of course, your favorite, Facebook.
Oh yeah.
Facebook is the place where dreams go to die. That is where all the lies are being spread all the time. And the thing is, people actually believe some of the ridiculous things that I've seen on there, which is why I stay off there.
Yeah, the Self-Preservation Society.
Yeah.
Isn't some of the 4chan, 8chan, isn't some of that kind of get into the dark web and stuff? Isn't it some shady, borderline dark webs where you get some shady stuff? Okay.
What is the borderline dark web? I'd love to know.
Well, if you would go to the 8chan or 4chan, they post even the sexual images in the beginning were stuff that's borderline, is this girl really over 18? We don't know. On the dark web, you can get that stuff, whatever, but I think in the early days, it was unchecked. You could really get all that stuff on there. But now it's kind of more regulated, but it's still that's why we say borderline, because it still has some stuff on there maybe you shouldn't be.
Maybe, just maybe you shouldn't be.
They live stream murder, so.
Yeah, I know.
The dark web is a place where conspiracy theories live. Real life conspiracy theories are on the dark web.
Yeah, and weapons and drugs are sold and sex trafficking, all that bad stuff.
And murder.
Yeah. Woke mom or sheep are social media users, and I'm sure most of us are, if not all of us, are we more likely to believe fake news just because we're tuned in all the time? Now, I feel if we're of a certain age, less so, but if, I'm a middle school teacher, so these kids some of them are really hooked to it, and I'm what are they going to believe when they're 20 years old? What are they going to believe when they, 25 or whatever? So we don't have an answer for this.
JD, I actually had a unit where I had my psychology class take a look at social media in general, and I had 4 different groups, and we looked at all the different platforms, Instagram, Facebook. They wanted Twitter up there, they wanted Reddit, and to see how they felt about whether or not it was harmful to them or why it could be. And it was a fascinating discussion, and for the most part, they realized in that moment that they needed to be discerning. They couldn't just take everything that was coming at them. So it was helpful.
I think that's really interesting too, because middle schoolers now, they don't know a world where these things didn't exist. So we're millennials, we grew up before the internet, at the advent of the internet, the advent of social media, all of these things, you've seen them happen. You can kind of incorporate them into your life and figure out how you want to use them. My little sister is 18, I don't think she's known
Yeah, same. I have a
Anything,
brother
yeah,
that's 17. He doesn't know life without the internet.
Right.
So.
It's a different world.
Yeah,
So
in
like,
education we call them digital natives.
That's
And
really
so
cute.
those who are young, who are born with the internet already up and running,
Right.
like that screens in their face, they're digital natives.
I remember like
All of us
A-Lo
are not.
dial-up, like the little sounds.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So.
It's already 2600.
Even to a point, like it's not just the younger people who grew up with it. It's like I know my uncle. He's on Facebook a lot, like you, and he always like shares these posts that's similar to what we had up there before because he thinks anything on the internet is
Yeah, and
real.
I agree. Like older people as well, they see things on the
super
internet.
share.
They're gonna be like, "Oh wow, I saw this on the internet." Like article after article. Like my mom sends me article after article after article.
That's why you have the block button, which is my
You can't block them, right?
I can't block my
You can block
mom.
anybody, trust me. You absolutely can.
Yeah, they're like, don't go to this country. Did you hear what's happening? I'm like, that didn't happen.
Yeah, no.
And then the article will be from some
Like
strange website
from
never heard of
2017.
before in my life. If it's not from .org, .net, .somebody, please don't give me .co. If it's .co, I don't want to read it.
Exactly.
It raises an interesting point. Like, are the most gullible the two different extremes?
Younger
Youngish
people and
children
older.
and seniors. Like, is that
Yeah.
Because like that's the target for like those annoying calls. Like, we were talking about your car warranty and stuff like that. And a lot of like older folks are falling.
It's like,
for
oh
that.
my god, my warranty. And
Yeah.
it's like, you never had one. Why?
They should like, oh my
They're calling me, so it must be true.
Gosh, there's a lot on this slide. Some of the stuff that just
You take
happened.
the conspiracy.
just-
I take the
just-
Conspiracy 101.
Just in the last few years, I mean, oh my God, has the floodgates opened up? But I'm sure most of you are familiar with most, if not all, of this stuff. But we just want to throw out some like recent examples that are out there. I don't think we need to speak to it exactly.
Yeah,
like,
the
I think,
Illuminati, 5G,
all that. Yeah.
the global elite.
Pizzagate is my personal favorite.
Microchips is my favorite.
Yeah.
Microchips is your favorite.
It's like people were
That
worried
was,
about.
I mean, it was. I know you heard about like if you got vaccinated, they were microchipping
No, I
you
know
so they
that.
could track you and kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love people who- at
Meanwhile,
least they're
we're all
creative.
carrying a chip with us.
Right, and
All the
time.
time. Tracking, they already know where we
Yeah.
are.
It's like when you talk about something and then your CIA agent is working overtime and you see the ad, it's like, yeah, we already have this.
This is more your slide if you want to speak to this one, a deep state or deep fake.
No, this quote was great because it talks to like, okay, there are actual governments out there that are using social media as current modern day propaganda tools, and like they've already caught them in the act. And so when these people believe in conspiracy theories, like we went down the list, we all believe in something that's like someone else may not believe in, but we can't really demonize these people for believing what they believe when it's been proven time and time again that certain things are true when it comes to conspiracies. So as we move on to the next section, like we don't want to call him out, oh, you're stupid for believing in this. It's like, no, things happen and things are continuing to happen. So we gotta be open-minded, not just shut everyone down because they believe in something that we don't believe in.
Also, just other than just being a kind person, also when you do that, the other person becomes defensive, and you think you're going to school them or learn them, and you teach them a lesson. Like you have to you have to kind of see them at their level at some point and be respectful. Even if you're like, oh my God, a person is too crazy, But
For
like,
instance, one of our good friends believes the moon landing was fake. Like he truly believes it. And when they get him, he's a good debater. So when they get together, they debate the moon landing. And I'm sitting there like, well, yeah. I was like, you both make good points, but I'm going with this guy because I think it happened. But
I've got in a heated debate about flat Earth many times. Okay? There are really some flat earthers out there.
what's the pros about flat Earth?
Basically, they say there's no way that the Earth can be round because airplanes. Because why did anybody fall off of it? Like, there's just ridiculous things. Like,
Again.
nobody's ever seen the end of the Earth.
The block button.
I should block them.
I'm telling you.
we actually did one of the videos on my channel was he's like, yo, I did a flat Earth thing.
Yeah.
Like I just use it as an excuse to teach, just I don't know.
Physics.
Physics, astronomy, like it's an excuse
Gravity.
of some history because Aristophanes out of ancient Greece, like he thousands of years ago figured out there was a curvature based on the shadow, like from two different towns in Greece. Like it was awesome. So, and it had a little puppet character to bounce back, but like I don't know if it's doing anything other than entertaining.
Sounds like
There's a
some
cult
fake
on
news.
Facebook of people that think the Earth is flat.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
So
actually
also,
put your video on that channel, on that page. It was the Facebook thing. I went to it and I put his video on there, and they like tore it apart.
Oh wow.
tell me this.
Yeah, that was when the freaking first out. Oh, I don't think I told him. Yeah, I didn't tell him. I just want to see what they said. Oh, sorry about that. But yeah.
So I found this about a year ago. This Abby, on the bottom has the credit of Abby Richards. She put this together. We're not saying we exactly agree on all this, but we thought it was interesting. It's maybe hard to read, but the idea is that there's different levels. So the bottom part of the triangle,
Just read one from each level so we get an idea.
Quintelpro? I don't even know about that one. Oh, MK Ultra I know about. So MK Ultra, like, okay, some of the stuff on the bottom is like, okay, seems to be grounded in reality. There was some shred of truth to it. Then the one before, like Epstein didn't kill himself, UFOs. It's like, okay, we have questions. But above that is like leaving reality. And then you get to like science denial, the anti-Semitic point of no return, which I wasn't totally clear on until I was like, what? There's like this weird like anti-Semitic bent on some of the craziest conspiracies out there. And then of course QAnon is on the top and it just says, detach from reality completely. And I hope we're not offending anyone with this chart. Like I'm not, again, we don't necessarily agree with all of it, but we thought it was a
Q is watching you.
Completely, and above that is Donald Trump.
They're still waiting for JFK. So if you just Google conspiracy chart, this will pop up and you can take a closer look. But I thought it was pretty interesting, so we threw it in there. So our final section is like, there's an educational angle to this panel. It's like, okay, how do we help others and ourselves discern fact from fiction? So how can we, especially our children, better utilize critical thinking skills to find truth among a sea of misinformation? And so we start with like what feeds it. Like these are ones that happen. Like these are real conspiracies that were proven correct. The Iran-Contra, Tuskegee experiments. I mean, like all this stuff. Like just recently, Malcolm's assassination. 2 guys were, exonerated, being like, oh yeah, no, he didn't. They didn't kill him after all. And like what? Like out of nowhere, like decades later.
Died mysteriously as well. So like all the comments right now are like, that's part of the conspiracy. But to speak to this, for example, night doctors, these were people at like Johns Hopkins University that people purported to be stealing, black homeless people off the street and performing experiments on them. And this isn't on there, but the United States actually did a mass sterilization of Puerto Rican women. So they didn't know, they went in they called it the operation. They went in, they cut their tubes, they didn't tell them what they were doing because they wanted to sterilize them. So these things sound crazy if you're not really familiar with them, but our own government has done stuff like this all the time.
These things actually did happen. So that opens it up so that it can be conspiracy theories about things because the government and society as a whole has done things that are not trustworthy.
But back then, you said that, you're like, wow, they're stealing people off the street. You're like, you're crazy. But this is also why, if we take it to like a race issue, certain communities of color, black people, Latinos, don't trust certain institutions. So for example, the black community and the vaccination. There is a history of not trusting the medical field because of everything that's happened.
When 600 black men were injected with syphilis without knowing they are not being treated for it. And a lot of people don't even know this happened, but this happened in America.
Right.
And
so it's like you can understand why maybe they would think this conspiracy is real or have hesitations toward it. And you have to take into account like the historical significance of these things that have happened that shape people's perceptions. So I didn't get it.
And if a whole government and a whole society victimized your people for generations, why would you believe this?
Trust
why would
them
you believe
with
it?
injection, right? Exactly.
And it's not just governments. Like one of the examples here, big tobacco. I remember this happening in the 90s where they were like, they knew it was causing cancer. They knew there was all kinds of problems. Like, no, we don't believe. I'm sure you've seen the video of it going down the line of all the CEOs of big tobacco. Like, no, we don't believe cigarettes are addictive. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? And you kind of see that now with big energy, with oil. Oil companies are still pushing back, being like, no, we need energy, guys. Oh, we have a little solar program going on in the back burner, but no, you still need that oil. And it's just like, it's also big corporations. It's not just governments. It's just whoever has something to power, has something to lose. And then this slide was more just like, oh my God, like you could have hours on this. We're not, but just the last 2 election cycles and everything attached to it, and
complete chaos.
Just it's depressing if we get too much into it, but there's so much going on.
Look at the power of that, right? Donald Trump, with his little crazy tail self, is talking about fake news. That term was coined while he was lying about stuff he was actually doing and conspiring with an outside government to do. So that term is so ubiquitous now. People use it all the time for everything.
And like I said, the safeguards on social media, because of this heated election cycle where all of these things come about, they're like, okay, we do have to put a cap on it. That's why Mark Zuckerberg had, these indictments and all of these trials against him. They're kind of like, you have responsibility for this. And this whole time, he was just letting things fly. So things might sound crazy, but things do
really
also
happen.
happen.
Yeah.
So it's like, where is the line, And it's hard to kind of discern where that line is at times.
This is a quick throwaway slide, but as a science geek and Christy as well, a common problem is the word theory. It's two different meanings in the scientific community versus the rest of us. And in science, a theory, as you can see from this comic strip came from the Amoeba sisters, they have it where it's actually been proven over and over and over again, like the theory of gravity, for example, or cell theory. It doesn't mean it's just like, it's a little ideas, it's totally different. The way most of us use theories, like, I have an opinion and a hunch, for those cubes, like I have a theory that a lot of us predicts the weather, like what? So I think that's part of the problem. I kind of wish the scientific community did not use the term theory because it's overused in a different way.
What would you use in this place?
I was gonna ask
Well,
that too.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, the term law used to be used. Like, there used to be the law of gravity. I don't know if anyone's familiar with this, and then they changed the theory. So now they got away from law, and I'm like, okay, because we still learn more, and you add stuff to it. You're like, okay, well, gravity works a little different by the time you get to a black hole. So I'm for it. I'm glad they got rid of the word law, but I also feel like theory should. I don't know. It's semantics. At the end of the day, it's semantics. What are you gonna do? Like, language is so limiting anyway. So real quick, this was a study done in 2016. So now we're looking at okay, who's falling for this? This study out of Stanford was for middle school students and undergrads. Over here it says sponsor. You can see it says sponsored content. It goes the real reasons women don't go into tech, and a significant portion of the students in the study thought it was a real article, even though it says sponsored content. Like, it just blows the mind. You're like, oh, stupid middle school kids. No, we were undergrads as well, like 20-somethings. Yeah, they're still a kid, I guess, but so that was interesting.
But you know what's
And
funny?
this was
2016.
Yeah.
Now, if you read any website, at the bottom there's all these sponsored articles with these clickbait titles, and sometimes you can keep scrolling and you forget you're on the sponsored stuff. I've clicked on random stuff like, oh, let me see this next article on Yahoo, which is a cesspool. But it's real. They use this to actually mine more advertising.
Other than Chrissy, this is your slide. So there was another study. You want to mention this?
Sure. Well, there's a couple actually that I researched, and I went with 2019 information because 2020 was very skewed. The information as far as testing and things like that in academia was skewed. So in 2019, the AP English language students, and for those of you that aren't familiar, AP Language asks you to synthesize, the very first essay asks you to synthesize 5 sources or 6 sources and be able to discern like graphs or articles that might be leaning one way or the other. You have 15 minutes to take a look at 6 of them, and then you write an essay. And only 50% of kids who were taught for a year to do that were able to do that. And that's not saying anything about the teachers. They try hard, we try hard. It's just how do we further their understanding of what is valid evidence to prove their point. How do you know you're discerning something that's correct? How do you know when something is true or right? How do you prove it? Secondly, state of California, this is the graphs from the Department of Education and Los Angeles Times, only half of California students met the state standards for 2019. There are several standards, but that's, again, not the teacher's fault, not all teachers' fault, some, okay, but not all. They're trying hard. And lastly, the ACT, only half. So the idea is that we are trying to teach these critical thinking skills, and it's becoming difficult, and there's more and more information out there.
Yeah, why doesn't it stick, in your opinion?
Why doesn't it stick? Time in the classroom. We need to have more time to focus on, this is a thesis statement, and we need a lot of time to focus on that because that's a 1-sentence answer to a question. This is what evidence is. This is what good evidence is. This is where you find that good evidence, because how do you determine, yes, it's .edu, that's good, but how do you know for sure? And I had a classroom question that I asked. Anytime a student asks a question I don't know, okay, 3 of you look it up. And then when they all look it up, I ask you, okay, each one of you, which one is your source? And hopefully, most of the time we get 3 different sources, and every time it's 3 different ways of stating it. So then we talk about how and why those are different. We have to be able to slow down in classrooms to be able to do that, and that's hard to do.
And then you want to speak to this one?
Oh, sure. Yeah, right. The California State Anchor Standards, there are 6. 2 of them that are important here, but also the world. Students need to be able to use technology and digital media strategically and capably, which means they need to be able to figure out what that means. And then they have to value evidence, not just propaganda, not just information that comes up like, this is attractive, click on me. I found this article on All Things Considered. You know All Things Considered NPR? Okay. 2016, these engineers took Wikipedia, which is a common source. This is what we all probably look at, okay? We try to tell the students not to use it because of this reason. Can we click on that link?
Yes.
We're about to hear an audio interpretation of those pages and how they are edited. This comes to us courtesy of our friends at The World According to Sound. It's a podcast by Chris Hoff and Sam Harnett. Take a listen.
This is the sound of Wikipedia being edited. It's a project made by Stephen Laporte and Mahmoud Hashemi. They wrote a program that turns every edit of a Wikipedia entry into a sound. Whenever someone adds information, you hear a bell. And when they delete something, you hear a string plucked. And the pitch reflects the size of the edits. The lower the note, the larger the edit. There are several edits every second on Wikipedia, thousands every hour. You can hear and see them all in real time at listen.hatnote.com.
Okay, and that's not to say that that's not good information, but how do we teach, especially younger people, what good information is? Yeah.
Right, and real quick, I want to say about, we all know that Wikipedia has to take it with a grain of salt, and I never thought about the timing until Christy brought this to me. I'm like, it's not just what are you looking up on Wikipedia, it's when are you looking it up. Like, I never really thought about that. Because I think some things like, I don't know, if you look up cell theory, like, it shouldn't be changing much, And so it's interesting that it's like, when did you view it, I'm not anti-Wikipedia, I'm not against it with my students. I say you can use it as a source, but you need to corroborate it with other legitimate sources. Like, it's okay for quick information. So I'm not poo-pooing on it, but if something's even a little bit controversial, forget it, don't even bother. So another thing was to know, where to go first. So one thing I'll teach my students is, where is it coming from? This is an interesting chart that came from this nonprofit work of All Stars that looked at media from the left and media from the right. This idea that all media is liberal is false. It's all over the spectrum, and your goal is to find something in the middle as best as possible. I would think. I don't want either extreme. I really don't.
Middle doesn't get clicks.
The middle doesn't get clicks. That's the thing. The extremist stuff is what sells. It's what's sexy, So a few sites. Not to say that these sites can't be compromised, but last time I checked, Snopes.com was still pretty good at fact checking. There's a thing called factcheck.org. And News ELA is a more of an education one, and so is Google Scholar. Yeah, so this is a clip from I did a video on climate change a few years ago, and so I'm arguing with my little puppet friend here. He's like a student of mine, let's say, and
He teaches puppets.
is a climate denialist and stuff like that. So I'm like telling him, therefore telling the audience of like what you could do. So it's kind of the same, some of the stuff that was there. It's just like a quick 1 minute excerpt.
Facts are facts. There are no alternatives. Remember, Jimbo, it's all about sources. 1, be skeptical. Just because somebody says it doesn't make it true. 2, who's saying it? Make sure what you're reading or watching is from a reputable source. 3, verify. Independent verification can confirm whether something is factual. Make sure it was originally published in a professional journal. You can verify this with Google Scholar. Certain facts can also be verified on Snopes.com. You getting all this, Jimbo?
So if you're not familiar with Google Scholar, it's for academia. So if it has to be, it doesn't mean there's problems with certain studies, of course not, but if it was published in a peer-reviewed journal in academia throughout the world, you're going to find on Google Scholar. You're not going to find just BS on there that you would in normal Google. So it's like almost like a filter within the search engine of Google. I highly recommend it. If it's anything even flirting with academia, check out Google Scholar first. When I found out, I was like, oh my God, like I discovered it a few years ago. I was like, this is amazing. I'm so glad there's something like that. But what's better than like, hey guys, look at this site or look at that site, because things could change. You don't know. Snopes could become, I don't know, like whatever. But so it's more about how to think, not what to think. And so the next generation science standards, which is not in every state, so the blue states are the states that adopted NGSS, and every science teacher I know, including myself, are all for it. It's not perfect, and standards are never perfect, but it's like way better. It's taken all the sciences for every grade level within academia, within school, K through 12 that is. Science education is central to the lives of all. So even if you don't like science and don't want to be a scientist, never before has our world been so complex, and science literacy is critical to making sense of it all. And I was coming from the understanding the standards. Within those standards are science and engineering practices, and 4 of them are just asking questions, the right questions, analyzing and interpreting data, engaging in argument from evidence, and evaluating and communicating information. So anyone can geek out and look into this more online later on, but like that's kind of where the standards are at now. It's like so much better than the old standards, at least in California. Real quick, this was a lesson I taught last year during the remote year of. This was a little lesson called Finding Credible News through Nearpod and through this nonprofit org called Common Sense Education. And this was kind of the idea of like how to be better critical thinkers. And they looked at 3 articles. One was fake. One was a little bit of both, which is common. So you get a grain of truth and then there's some nonsense peppered in. And then one was like completely made up, like BTS and Beyonce are, I forgot, it was something ridiculous. And then so kids were like actually practice what is real and what's not. And then the last slide, you can find us online as well. These are 2 infographics that are really quick and just like how to spot fake news.
I really want to take a picture of this for sure.
Yeah, if you want to, I'll probably leave the slide up while we take, I think we have time for like maybe a couple of questions. So I'll leave the slide up for like a couple more minutes to take a picture. And then you can Google it. Like the bottom one is from the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, which I don't even know is an actual organization, but sure. And like, of course, they're pissed off as much as us teachers when people come in with crazy stuff. So we have to wrap it up. So thank you so much for coming out. Thank you for the question. Let the slide up. You want to stay in touch and follow any of us. We can do a picture of this. But thank you so much for coming out. Enjoy the rest of the con and what's up.